Welcome to episode 6 of Rethink with Refash, a platform where we challenge the norms, spark meaningful conversations, and inspire a new way of thinking about sustainability. I'm your host, Akanksha Kela Akashi, the founder of Refash, and today I have with me Shruti Singh, the country head of Fashion Revolution India. Fashion Revolution is a global movement at the forefront of reshaping how we think about fashion's impact, not just on the planet, but also the people who make our clothes. Welcome, Shruti.
Thanks, Akansha. Very happy to be here.
Great. So let's start with what Fashion Revolution really is and what was the incident in 2013 that initiated this entire movement.
So Fashion Revolution, as you said, is a global movement that was born because of an incident that happened in Dhaka, Bangladesh in 2013. There was a factory where garment workers were making, mostly women, were making clothes for a lot of brands that we wear today and we love today. And the factory collapsed on the workers and 1,100 people lost their lives. And the tragedy of it was twofold. One, brands did not know or said that they did not know that their clothes were being made there. And it took a lot of seeing tags out of rubble and people being pulled out to see the tags and see which brands were actually making the clothes there, showing that there was no traceability, there was no accountability. And second, that this could have been avoided because the cracks on the building were there. Workers actually refused to go in, and because the workers, as you know, have lesser agency in advocating for themselves, do not have that negotiating powers with suppliers and brands. They were asked to go to the building. As a result, many family members lost people that day. And it's not an isolated incident. So that was the fourth largest industrial disaster at that time, which shook the entire industry and was a wake-up call. But this has happened a lot of times where you would see apathy towards workers. You would see that there's the workers' rights, the wellness of workers, the transparency is not there. Still, 11 years from that time, that can really bring about that change. And Fashion Revolution was started by Ursula de Castro and Carrie Sommers, along with so many other volunteers spread across now 75 countries, to just say, we love fashion. We don't want anyone to die because of fashion. We want fashion to be a source of empowerment. We want fashion to be a source of inspiration and creativity and not a source of misery. What is the point of feeling good about the clothes that we wear right now and what I'm wearing if I knew that this came at the cost of someone's sleepless nights or someone working in a factory where there was poor ventilation, or that they were not allowed a decent break.
Or a child making that garment.
Or a child making that garment.
Yeah.
So these things, and we know these things are not good, but the fashion supply chains are very complex. They're long, they run across multiple geographies, which means that it is very hard to have visibility unless the people who are accountable themselves would ask and demand of that visibility. And Fashion Revolution's focus has been to put the power into the consumer's hands, to say you do have power, because individually feel like we can't do enough, but collectively we can do a lot. The first campaign was Who Made My Clothes? So you saw a lot of people actually go online and just simply ask their favorite brand, do you know who made my clothes?
Yeah.
Because if you go back, what happened in the Rana Plaza incident? People did not know that the clothes were being made there, or they shrugged off responsibility as the supplier responsibility. But brands do hold a lot of power over how the suppliers actually engage with their workers, because it is a race to the bottom. So suppliers are actually at the behest of the directions by brands, and they are trying to squeeze out, can we make the fastest, cheapest clothing? And while the raw material prices are increasing, fashion is becoming cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
The math doesn't hold up. So there is someone else paying the cost of the cheap fashion that we have access to today.
Yeah.
And those are the workers.
Yeah.
So it's been a really important journey. And I think I don't see it as an organization. I really see it as a movement for anyone who loves fashion, anyone who feels strongly about making fashion a better system, to just be a part of it and say, hey, what can I do? and can we do it together? Because together we are, in that solidarity, we have more power.
Yeah, I think the Who Made My Clothes campaign was so brilliant because suddenly on social media, we saw, consumers actually holding out placards and, those images cropping up everywhere asking brands who made my clothes. And what kind of shift did you see with that campaign?
I think the beauty of that campaign was the simplicity. Because often when we talk about sustainability or climate change, it can be very jargonish, it can be very difficult for a common person to engage in that movement and understand what can I do.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you wear clothes, if you understand and love your clothes, this is a simple thing that you can do. Who made my clothes?
Yeah.
Mere kapde kisne banaye?
Right.
And just that power of multiple people asking, and it did make, like you said, on social media, millions of impressions. So many people, for example, tagging the fast fashion brands and asking them who made my clothes. I think about the second year when we ran the Who Made My Clothes campaign, brands started responding to it to say, okay, I made your clothes, and this is the worker. We know about the worker conditions. We know how much they were paid. And it's not about us having that information, but really, do they have that information?
Yeah.
Are they tracking that data? Is that data important for them? Now it's a lot of things are mandatory in their annual reports and sustainability reports, but at that time, a lot of things were not mandatory. So that's what Who Made My Clothes did. And What's in My Clothes was another campaign which is still being run to talk about the materials, because fashion comes from fossil fuels, farms, forests. So at some point there is a trade-off with how it's impacting or interacting with the planet as a whole. If we speak about the environmental side of fashion. So it's important to know the clothes that we're wearing, and skin is our largest organ. So the clothes that, what is our skin breathing? How does it impact our health, our ecosystems? When we wash the clothes, do microfibers and microplastics end up in our oceans, in our cloud systems, in the womb of a child, like of a new mom carrying a child? Is it in our bloodstream? So we haven't fully uncovered the impact of the materiality of our clothes. So that was the second question, to really urge consumers to flip the label and check what is it that the clothes are made of, and how does that, why does it matter? Why does materials matter? So that was the second campaign, and I think the shift that it has brought about is to ask questions.
So take us a little behind the scenes of what it means to be running Fashion Revolution India.
It's a lot of joy. We're still a volunteer movement, and we are a group of amazing, amazing people who come from different walks of life. Let me tell you, not everyone is from the field of fashion or crafts. It's a diverse group. And diverse in terms of the cities that they come from as well. And it's an open movement for everybody to join in. So it's not like an organization where you say, I'm applying for a role and what do I do? It's more of like, hey, I love fashion. I love to create change. This is what I want to do at Fashion Revolution, and tell me how can the team support, or how can the community support. Everyone has a full-time job, and they do this over and above their job because they really want to create that change. And it's pure joy, because you can see collective action. You can see everyone building on each other's ideas and really supporting each other. If you attend one Fashion Revolution event, I guarantee you that you will come back feeling super hopeful, super creative, super charged, knowing that there is an army of people that you can lean on. And I think that's what Fashion Revolution is all about, and that's what it means to be a part of contributing to this movement.
I think I completely agree with you, because I'd like to share as well that, Refash actually started because of Fashion Revolution Week. And that was, I think that for me, I was also very, very curious about, overall how fashion is impacting our everyday life. And I think that's what really just brought me to one of the events back in 2018. And I walked out with the idea of Refash. So I felt what you're talking about. So I think that I have been a fashion revolutionary as well. Maybe not part of the team and as somebody on the team, but definitely in spirit.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that is the kind of like impact that advocacy movements have. Sometimes we're not able to measure that change. So you shared this story today, so we know that this is something that inspired you or some conversation sparked something.
Yeah.
But that sense of revolution and that sense of change, I'm sure, always belonged to you.
Yeah.
It just becomes a medium to unlock that in some ways. And I think that is what I envision Fashion Revolution to always be.
Lovely. And how did you get involved with Fashion Revolution?
Serendipity, I would say. It was not by design. So I am a fashion graduate. Like, I have done fashion design. I ended up working in social impact and education field. And I went and did policy because I really realized that when you do public policy and you work with government, that's where change happens. Or that's what I would say, that my journey has been mostly in pursuit of where can I make the maximum impact, which first led me to social and working with not-for-profits. And then that's where I realized they said education is important. So I said, okay, great, I'm going to work in education now. And then when I was working in education, they said, to truly make that change countrywide, it's working with government. I said, okay, great, I'm going to work with government. Yeah. So, and when I went to work with government, I was told that you have a design background, which is great.
Yeah.
But it's a non-traditional background to be engaging, and I'm talking about years back.
Yeah.
To come from a non-traditional background to engage with government on topics of policy, and of course I needed that kind of technical expertise, so I went and did public policy. And when I came back with full enthusiasm that I'm going to work in, with the Ministry of Human Resource Development or with education field, one of my friends, and I think you may know her, Darshana, who leads Sustainable Fashion Day and Sustainability at Reliance. She actually was my classmate at University of Arts London, just as yourself.
Yeah.
And she called and she said, there's some policy project, which is to do with cotton farming, and you're the only person who I know who does policy. Would you be interested in taking on this project? And I said yes. And I read the brief of the project, and I got on one call with the team. And it just clicked. You can't connect the dots forward, you can only connect them backwards. And I was like, this is the right place for me, and this is what I want to do. So I started out with policy. So I did the first report, which was on gender equity in cotton farming and how to support the sustainable practices, which led to the second report, which was during COVID, which was reimagining craft economy post-COVID. And then the third one, which was, I think, one of the favorite projects and the best, most inspirational projects I've done, which is craft in the age of climate crisis.
Yeah.
So one thing led to another, but I realized I just don't want to do only policy work, because overall, like every part of my body was like, what can I do? Like, what else can I do? Can I help support event mapping? Can I be a volunteer? Can I make posters? So, it was really inspirational being part of Fashion Revolution's team. And I've never looked back ever since that moment.
And how many years has it been now?
8 years now.
Wow, amazing. So in these sort of 8 years that you have led Fashion Revolution India and overall, 11 years of Fashion Revolution globally, what are you the most proud of?
Personally, I'm just really proud of the team and the kind of people it attracts, because there's so much love for the planet, there's so much hope for the planet, and not just in fashion, but in general. Like, these are good people who want to create really good change, and they have the talent to do it. So I think that's the most what I'm proud of. I'm of course proud of the report, Craft in the Age of Climate Crisis. It didn't start out, I didn't think it would end up where it did. Right. When it started out, it was one idea of saying, can we get some people together to understand what is the impact of climate change on craft?
Yeah.
One roundtable led to another. British Council was a very good supporter. They funded this project. And then we said, can we expand it to multiple cities? I think there's more to unlock. And they were like, yes, let's do it. So they were there with the journey with the Fashion Revolution team and British Council, going to different cities, speaking to different people, getting roundtables, doing field visits to really understand what is the impact of climate change on craft ecosystems, and it's profound.
And what did you find? Can you share a little bit
Yeah,
about?
sure.
Yeah.
So climate change is here, right? Like India is one of the most vulnerable. It's in the red zone. It's most vulnerable and prone to the heat wave and the change of temperatures, which currently not documented well enough. And our report was simply a learning report. So I really see that as a starting point. But we found that anytime a climate change happens, or if there's irregular rain, or there are floods, or there's disruption of climate and weather patterns, raw materials get impacted. If there is a flood, then people don't have access to their looms, right? So there is a loss of livelihoods. There's a loss of like what materials that they have. People keep saying weather has changed, but it's really hard to make the link that it is our actions, our collective actions of the industries, brands, multiple industries, decision makers that are actually leading to the climate change. It's not changing by itself. It is, in some sense, of course, change is constant, but the acceleration is because of human activity and human actions. Yeah. But we also found, like I have to add this, what we also found were stories of resilience, stories of cultural heritage, stories of traditional knowledge that is fantastic as a source of learning for sustainable fashion, natural dyes, regenerative water systems for block printing, which uses a lot of water. So how can we make sure that the water that is used for block printing goes back almost in a way that it can be potable water, just using plants. So there are a lot of stories of knowledge that crafts and ecosystems of artisans already hold, which haven't been fully unlocked yet. So that was one of my biggest takeaways, that craft has a lot to teach the fashion industry. And that was the story of hope again. So while we learned that there's so much devastation happening because of climate change, but there was also stories of like, these are best case studies and these need to be shared forward, because there's a lot of peer learning that can be taken from these studies.
But how do we then make craft, a sort of point of conversation in the sustainability discourse? How do we include that, and how do we make sure that this is something that people actually see when they're talking about sustainability at large?
I think it starts from documenting such learnings, but also really looking at, like I said, it was a starting point. So really looking at where can this go from here? What are the data points which are a gap that can make compelling argument for a focus on some solution? Because as you know, a lot of decision makers, either in policy or if they are investing, they need data to be able to say, A, is there a problem? What is the problem going to solve itself? What is the rate at which the problem is going to increase? What is the business imperative of this problem? Like, when do we need to solve it? How do we need to solve it? And if they also have limited budgets, how do they deploy? And it's a trade-off, right? So how do they choose between the different things they may be considering? So data is one of the biggest gaps, I think, that needs to be documented, filled. It is something at such a big scale. I think the government needs to do this exercise. Perhaps there are a lot of organizations who are doing incredible work in craft and trying to fill this data gap, but they can only do it in the areas that they are working in. So definitely needs a more institutional nationwide support.
So how can we as consumers hold brands accountable for workers' exploitation? Give us 3 checkpoints.
I think the biggest one is maths. So if you know that a garment is made from like a premium fabric and it is costing only 500 rupees, some math is incorrect there, so it's the raw materials will go into it, workers' salaries will go into it, there's a time, logistics, a lot of things go into actually the math of bringing that garment to you at some price. So if the math doesn't add up, that's a red flag for you to see. The second thing is to really ask the brands, continue to ask them who made my clothes, because it shows the brands that you value that, and not just as a marketing gimmick or a campaign or something you do just periodically, but really, really see if your brands are disclosing that information. Do they disclose how many men and women are employed at different levels of the supply chain, do they disclose their salaries? Do they disclose the worker conditions? Do they disclose their audit reports in a way that it's easy for consumers to actually understand that information and make informed choices? So I think that would be the second. Please ask who made my clothes. And the third one would be to really relook at your wardrobes. I don't think we are going to buy our way into sustainable fashion. So somehow the narrative is that if the consumers buy sustainably, then the planet will be saved. But that's not the truth. And that's not the whole truth. While it will play a role in when a consumer chooses to consume, it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is there is enough clothing in this world present today, which has already been made over these multiple years and decades, that are there to clothe you.
Yeah.
Maybe some things are out of style. Can they be restyled? Yes. Can something be upcycled? Yes. Can garment workers be involved in that upcycling process? Yes. If you see the upcycling community and you work with upcyclers, so you know that a lot of it is rooted in crafts and artisans, and it's a great source of livelihood for a lot of people in this ecosystem and a lot of women. So why is that not also explored as a source of not buying into fashion, but like really extending the life of those fashion garments and still having something brilliant to wear that you feel proud to own and you feel proud that it's in your wardrobe? So I feel like there's this narrative of not really understanding what actions will really make a change. And another thing I want to add is there was a really beautiful campaign called 1 Hour T-shirt. So it takes 1 hour for a garment worker to fully finish your T-shirt. But if today I asked you, and you're from fashion background, imagine I asked somebody else to really spend that 1 hour trying to build that T-shirt together, and then ask them, how much do you think you should be paid for this effort? And then if that math does not add up with what you buy in your stores, that means you have to rethink your fashion purchases, you have to rethink the way you are engaging with your brand. And you're not alone. Stand for it. There is a wider community. So if you feel strongly about it, if you feel strongly about worker wellness, you should definitely use your voice. You may think you have 1,000 followers, you may have 10,000 followers, you may have 0 followers. But if you speak to your families, if you speak to your school students, college peers, corporates, anywhere, in any institution, if you talk to just one more person and let them know that their choices matter, then you've done a great work and you are a fashion revolutionary. So I'm really looking at that kind of change that people can create.
But what would you say to somebody who, hears you out and hears this entire conversation and then probably heads to a mall and, goes into a fast fashion store, is hesitant, does not want to, pick up like the latest dress that they see on the racks, but is again like gives in because it's cheap, it's trendy, they want to wear it to the party on the weekend. How in that moment, how does a customer who wants something trendy, something cheap, something that will make them look really cool and on Instagram, what do you say to them to make the better decision in that moment?
I think you can't guilt someone into changing. First of all, I don't think that has ever worked. We don't guilt, we don't shame, right? People will take decisions how they value, so every decision we make is based on what we value. So if we value an Instagram look, or if we value a Bollywood star, or if we value a certain fabric, or if we value a certain designer, that is going to weigh in on our decision making, and not all of these other things which currently as a society we don't value. We are not a care economy. We are a very consumeristic economy. So what that means is that I might nudge you into making the right purchase once, or going second-hand shopping first, or looking in your wardrobe, or borrowing from your friend. But to really make that as a sustained practice, it needs a systemic change. And it's unfair to put that burden of change on consumers alone, because consumers, while have incredible power to hold brands accountable, that change is going to take a lot of time. So when have you seen all of us vote as a block? So asking everyone to be on the same page is tough. Like how, if you have like 2 kids in your house, can you get them to have consensus on one thing? No. So where is this power? This power actually lies with brands to make the right choice. And unfortunately, brands make that choice only when the government mandates it. So I think it's a cycle. It's like, who's responsible? Who's going to pay for this change? Who's going to be responsible for this transition? And we've just constantly valued volume over loving those clothes. It's like really looking at not loving your clothes enough or not loving the environment enough. So we're not built on that value system today. We were built on this system. And I really feel that for this change to happen, it's a mindset shift, but it's also mainstreaming something takes time. And we don't have enough infrastructure, to be honest, to be able to support, for example, when we say, hey, for example, you go to a store and you say, I'm buying something which is recyclable. I did a great job, right? So you feel proud of yourself because the brand told you it's recyclable, you got it, you did the right thing, the brand did the right thing. But unfortunately, we don't have infrastructure system to actually recycle it. So while 100 billion garments are produced every year, only 1% get recycled, right? Yeah. And that's because we don't have the infrastructure support. Now the question is, who builds this infrastructure? So what Refash is doing is making accessible the upcycling products, which were not that accessible to a lot of audiences. But someone had to do that, right? Like if you just told the consumers, hey, you should buy an upcycled garment. Yeah. And they would say, great, where? Yeah. Like, where do we go and how do we know? And in this era of like greenwashing, it's really hard. It's a lot of like cognitive load on consumers to really figure out if the brand is telling me they're doing good things, are they really doing it or not? Are they paying their workers or not? Are they using good materials or not? So I feel like it's a lot of burden on consumers as well to figure it out. So there should be systems, there should be ecosystem actors really taking on that responsibility to make it easier.
Don't you find yourself very like demotivated thinking of all of this, or in a helpless position also, because there's so much that needs to change, and yet like you just spoke about how it's very difficult to pinpoint and say that where the change needs to happen or who's to blame. How do you sort of pick yourself back up and say that I'm still going to go down the same path and keep doing this because I know the change will happen at some point in time, but I don't know if I see it in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. How do you ensure that you're on that path on an everyday basis?
I think motivation comes from different spaces, right? Like sometimes it's having this conversation with you today. It's sometimes doing Fashion Revolution's event work. It is sometimes reading something inspiring of some incredible person who created a change, or Fashion Revolution's team that is working with the European Parliament. There is so much hope and inspiration there. You just have to look in that direction. I am a new mom. So for me now, my source of inspiration and motivation is creating, like you said, will I see that change in time when my daughter grows up? Yeah. So that is the source of inspiration. I don't deny there is eco-anxiety. I don't deny there are days where I would wake up and say, does it even matter? Like what I'm doing every day, what all these volunteers are doing, all these organizations, activists, everyone who's trying this, does it matter? What is the exit strategy? Like, do we even have an exit strategy? Because for an organization like ourselves, what is the exit strategy? That we don't exist. Yeah. And do we have that exit strategy? Do we see that rainbow? Like, do we see that path? But I also feel a lot of hope when I read good stories. So I make it a habit to read all the good news.
Where do you find the good news?
Yes. There are a lot of amazing people putting together all the good news. I actually make it a point to say, okay, it matters because XYZ person was able to save the bees community in some place, or they were able to safeguard, forests in Boreal from being cut down for viscose, so that really gives me hope.
Right. What is your relationship with fashion? I know that in this entire sort of, because you know fashion, the dark side of fashion from the inside, how do you enjoy fashion?
I really enjoy fashion. Like, I have to say, I come from a fashion design background, so I've always grown up loving fashion. But how we consume, again, I think it's how we consume fashion has, for me, changed a lot. So I did go through my era of thrift shopping from Sarojini and really kind of look at the new clothes and what is that, not outfit of the day at that time, but really look at what suits my style, what would make me look good for a new event. Do I get something new to wear? But I also come from a family which used to say, you don't need to buy a new thing for every event. And like most families in India, I would say, there was a culture of sharing. So I have actually found love of fashion in sharing. So a lot of garments that I get now are either made from something old, or if it's a new garment, then I would make sure, like for example, what I'm wearing today can fit different people's different sizes. So I do share my wardrobe with my sister, my mom, my friends, and people know what is in my wardrobe. So they would come and actually say, hey, I have an event, can I please borrow something from you? So I feel like there's a joy of loving fashion without having to buy into that joy.
Yeah.
And that has been not just, it's not because I work in sustainable fashion, but because I did not know that the joy could be, like the creativity and joy could be multifold through that process. So I traced back, my grandmother used to be a collector of like saris from different states. And what was made at that time, the raw material, the fabric, they don't make it like
Yeah,
that anymore.
true.
So it's like super, even if at that time it wasn't like, it was really expensive or it was, you know, like a legacy garment.
Yeah.
It was a simple garment,
Yeah.
but they don't make it like that anymore. So I actually went tracing whatever saris she owned, and she passed on to different generations, and they're not using it anymore. And I said, if you're not using it,
Give
you
it
give
back
it to
to
me.
Wow.
So now I have this repository of like these beautiful garments
beautiful.
and beautiful saris, which a lot of people said, we don't use it, it's too plain, the color is like this. I said, it's great, no problem. There are these beautiful upcyclers, there are people who mend really well, so we'll get this sorted. And then I wear them with pride. So I really think that there are so many ways to enjoy fashion without subscribing to that pressure of fast fashion. And we buy things for joy. But genuinely, I feel when I speak to a lot of people, and we work with a lot of, like our events are with a lot of youngsters, with a lot of Gen Z, millennials, and I ask them, like, how long does that joy last if you buy something new? And the fact is, it doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
So joy has to be found. It's more deeper. Like it's deeper than a purchase. So
Yeah.
that's what my relationship with fashion is, and that's what most people's relationship with fashion that I work with is. And I feel that every time I discover something new, like I said, 1% learning every single day to really understand. Oh, you went for thrifting, there's this new place. That's how I discovered Refash. And I thought, wow, there's a platform that sells all these upcycling products. Then great, then can I just,
Yeah.
can I channelize my energy there?
Yeah.
So I think that is something, and I hope for this joy and love for clothing, because as Ursula says, loved clothes last.
Yeah.
So I feel like I hope everyone discovers it, because it's memories and stories associated with it. So when I got all of these saris, then my mom is telling me, this one was given to XYZ family member on this occasion, and she wore it then. She looked so beautiful, and there's a photograph of her wearing it. And I look at all these gorgeous women wearing
Yeah.
and sharing these clothes.
They were the real influencers, I feel.
They were the real influencers, and like my grandmother really was. Like I look at her photograph and I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could
Same.
steal her wardrobe.
Absolutely. I resonate with that so much, because when my husband and I got engaged, my grandmom was still with us, and she wore a sari, which I re-wore after she passed away, and for Diwali last year. And I almost felt like she was with us, during the festival, blessing us, even though, physically she was not with us. But I agree with that so much, that instead of just going and buying something from the stores to wear on Diwali, it was such a beautiful experience to wear something that was my grandmom's, that I just wore with a different blouse. And it was just, I loved it. I think that's probably my favorite memory of that Diwali. So yeah,
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I've got goosebumps. So that's what I mean. Like there are so many ways to enjoy and still look your best. Like it wasn't like you did it just because of the memory. You did it because you could carry that fashion in a beautiful way. It reminded you of her, but it still made you feel good and enjoy your relationship with your clothes.
100%. How does a customer spot red flags in terms of greenwashing?
I would say read the label. So what does the label say vis-a-vis what the brand is saying? And really try and understand. So sometimes you see things like polyester rich, but you don't really know the percentage
Yeah.
breakdown. So I think it's important to go deeper into where the clothes were made, what's in your clothes. Another thing to do while really looking for red flags is be specific with data. So if a brand is saying we make sustainable clothes, how much of their 100% collection, what percentage is actually made out of sustainable fabrics, or how much of it, because sometimes they have a capsule collection or limited collection. Another thing to look at is offsetting. I would say a lot of time you would hear a brand saying we're carbon neutral, we're carbon positive, and then the question for them is how much of that carbon positivity or neutrality has been because of actually making the change in your supply chain, your raw materials, the processes, and how much have you outsourced that to organizations that would grow trees for you and offset that for you. So are you really insetting or making that change in your supply chain, or are you continuing business as usual so that you can say I'm carbon neutral, but really what you're doing is just offsetting your responsibility and outsourcing your responsibility to another player and not hold accountability whether those trees have been grown or not. And just to be clear, trees are not forests. Forests are a collection of trees. They are home to indigenous community. They are 100 trees in a forest are not equivalent to 100 trees planted today,
True.
which will grow up to
Yeah.
be some sort of plantation forest.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is one way to really test the brand. Be specific, read between the lines, ask your brands. You can always email. Now in the era of LinkedIn and where you have access to a lot of people, you can actually reach out and say, can you tell me exactly what happens to my clothes when I put them in your take back program? Can you tell me if they actually end back in landfills? Are you using them again in your supply chains? When you say recycled polyester, are you doing textile to textile recycled polyester? Because that's one of the biggest myths, right? When I tell someone that recycled polyester actually does not come from polyester clothing, people are shocked to learn that it comes from PET bottles, and that is taking a perfectly circular system and putting it into a system where you won't be able to recycle it indefinitely. In fact, there is a report that says that more PET bottles were made just because the demand for recycled polyester shot up. So what are we doing? So I feel like those are the biggest red flags. But again, I would not put that burden on consumers to find out everything. But I would say be curious, find out, do something about it. That would be one of the best things that you can do to
Do you
hold
think that
brands accountable.
smaller brands are actually leading the way to these circular models or these aspects as against larger corporations?
Yes. A simple answer, yes. Multiple reasons. Smaller organizations, are more agile. They are able to micro-experiment. They are able to iterate their processes faster. So decision making is easier with smaller brands because you would have one decision maker, two decision makers, or three decision makers, but someone you can count on your fingers. But when you look at a larger brand, how they're set up in offices, the production department is removed from the design department, and then you have the finance department that has a different mandate. The merchandising department has a different mandate. So getting all of these, different stakeholders, even if individually they really want to make a change, getting everyone on the same page with their respective mandates takes a little bit of time, but also a lot of energy to change a already broken system into something that is reimagined. And I really think that change will happen if, for example, all their salaries were linked or their compensation was linked not to financial benefits and how the financial health of the company, but to sustainability goals. So imagine if that started happening, how soon that agility will happen in bigger brands as well.
How do you think that can happen? Because eventually the people on top only care about profits, right? So how do we make that happen?
I think a couple of ways. There are different mechanisms. For example, there are a lot of new policies coming up which would mandate, for example, that if you use recycled polyester made out of PET bottles and that is not allowed to enter or sell in a particular region, then suddenly it's a government mandate that says, no, you can't do this. And overnight things change, right? Industries can be very agile when they have to be. So when single-use plastic, certain microns was banned, did it impact anybody? No, because overnight there were more solutions. Quickly people jumped into different kind of solutions, different products to still cater that need. So I feel that that kind of a push is also needed from the industry. Expecting brands alone to make that change in silo is not going to happen. We've done that for 11 years. We've used consumer advocacy to do it. We have asked brands individually to do it. We have asked for transparency. And it's not like change is not happening. It is happening. But like I said before, it is not happening at the rate that it needs to have. So I think that bit needs to be sorted out. But we need to advocate with policymakers. And luckily, policymakers are taking fashion and textile department and sector more seriously. And I'm really hopeful of that change happening soon, where there would be mandate for change. One of the biggest problems also, Akansha, is that what is sustainable? Do you know, like, can you give me 10 points that if I do 10 things as a brand, I'm sustainable versus something else that is not? So in absence of a very clearly defined mandate or very clearly defined checklist, sustainability will be thrown around just as a marketing gimmick.
Which is what you think is happening today?
It is happening today. But if you've seen, a lot of laws now are also having a crackdown on greenwashing. So if you say you have a sustainable collection, you have to be able to prove that it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And a conscious
have all
collection.
The data.
You have to have the data. So brands have gotten away with some of these greenwashing antics, I would say, but not for long, because now consumers know about greenwashing, governments know about greenwashing. So I feel that that change will definitely happen now.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that that's something that we're all, that's something that's going to help the entire movement accelerate in the right sort of, path. Let's talk a little about when you were in college. What made you at that point in time, really sort of know that this is, for example, initially when you knew that you wanted to go down, say, policy. Was there anything that you think that you would have told your younger self at that point in time to have done differently?
No. I think I would not be here if I had done anything different, but I would definitely iterate and say, trust the process, whether it's looking at a process or a journey of becoming a change maker or trying to create change, or you're working in an office and you're really trying to change systems and you feel like you're the only one trying to advocate for that change, which is what's happening with a lot of sustainability enthusiasts in bigger corporations, that they are facing this problem. But I would say trust the process and always value people. They're not human resource. We're all human beings and we all deserve a good life. And it's our moral luck if someone is born in a privileged family and someone else ends up working as a child on the factory floor. But there's it's called a veil of ignorance. So if you had to make a policy or if you had to make rules for the fashion industry, but you didn't know whether you're going to end up as a garment worker or a CEO of a fashion brand, how would you then reimagine those fashion systems if I didn't tell you which role you played? That is the kind of veil of ignorance we need when we are really looking at a fair system.
And who do you think needs to do that? I mean, again, we keep going back to who. I mean, I feel like this is like a puzzle that we're trying to solve.
Yeah.
What is the sort of the point of acceleration in this entire puzzle?
Personally, my opinion is twofold. One is through government mandate, because government will mandate something that will almost make it important and integral for organizations to make it a priority. But ultimately, I feel that the change will happen when brands and suppliers work together. More often, you would see that brands would put something on the supplier would put it on the brands. And I don't think that we need that tennis match. We really need for them to really work together to find solutions, to fund solutions, and to work with the government ecosystem to make that change. Because otherwise, it's going to take multiple years and multiple generations after us would not see that change. So I really feel that the onus of changing the industry at the scale that we need actually lies on collaboration between brands, government, and suppliers.
And that happens when, individual activists or organizations like the Fashion Revolution actually advocate for that change. Because otherwise, these large institutions have so many other things to do and they really don't know where to start from, right?
Again, and data as well, right? So there are a lot of reports, there are a lot of ecosystem players, independent organizations that are actually going down into is the brand greenwashing? You say your viscose is not coming from ancient and endangered forests, but there are reports that find that you are actually harming the Amazon rainforest. Then these ecosystem players, these researchers, these organizations play a very, very important role as almost like a watchdog, as someone who's calling out if you're saying something wrong, they're calling it out, and also advocating for the right direction. So that makes that role very, very important as not just an individual activist. And you see collaboration really play out in a lot of forums. Like I was at COP28 and I was presenting Craft in the Age of Climate Crisis report. And for me, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to talk about this report. And it's an important topic to talk about craft in the context of sustainable fashion. And when I went there, I realized that all these ecosystem players, activists, individuals, organizations are actually collaborating to really build that momentum for change. Like, okay, you're doing a study on viscose, you're doing a study on polyester, you're doing a study on garment workers. How do we share that information? How do we really collaborate so that we become almost like a really powerful influencing bloc? And at biggest of forums like COP, fashion was not a topic that was discussed before. But as you see, and COP30 is coming up, fashion would be a very important sector to look at. And I think that itself is a win, because when industry wakes up and notices that everyone's talking about it and there are so many people researching about it, they do get their act together, because like we said, for them, sales are important.
Yeah.
And if they do something wrong and there are so many people who care about them doing something wrong, then they would not do it, right? Because they care about still being the favorite amongst consumers. So there are different ways of creating change. And I think all of those systems play a role. But I'm really hoping that we step up and push the pedal faster.
Very well said. I think the last thing that I want to know, we touched upon a little bit of this in the conversation when you shared that so much, like, I don't remember the exact number, but X amount of clothes have already been produced to actually clothe us for the next probably 5 to 6 generations. If we were to make brands stop producing, do you think that world could exist?
Yes and no. I don't think the objective is to get them to stop producing. I think the objective is for them to produce better. So if that means using all of these clothes, the billions of clothes that are already lying in landfills, and bringing them back into the supply chains to still create something new for the consumers, yes, that's a good practice to have. If it means that they give more weightage or priority to value of clothing, or the longevity, the duration, the fabric, rather than put that focus on volumes, then that's a good practice to have. Because let's not forget, this industry is also fueling lots of jobs. Millions of jobs and livelihoods depend on it. So the idea is not to shut fast fashion down. It has always been to make it better. We know that if we really adjusted garment workers' salary to fair wages, then they will not be able to sell at the price that they are selling it at. Right?
Yeah.
So really fixing the system means fixing that baseline that has been set. And currently the baseline is faster, cheaper, more. A realistic timeline would be, it's not possible to sell a t-shirt for 500 rupees.
Yeah.
If you're not paying the cost, someone else is.
True.
So realizing that is really important.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shruti. This has been such a insightful conversation for me, and thank you for being so generous with your answers.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for having a platform where people who are doing work can can actually share their stories. I hope, like I get inspired by the episodes that I've seen and the people I've heard, and this is also a way to create that hope. It answers your question when you said, how do you find hope?
Yeah.
So this would be one of the things I would say, okay, what is the next episode and where can I find hope? You know,
I'm
so this
so
would be
happy to
my
hear
dose
that.
of motivation.
Wow, I'm so happy to hear that. We hope to keep having more such conversations so that we can drive that, that sort of change forward. So the last segment is a bit of a fun segment.
Okay.
I'll ask you a question, a question, and whatever is the first thing that comes to your mind, you can give me a one-word answer or whatever is the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
One word that defines your fashion philosophy.
Revolutionary.
Most overused buzzword in sustainable fashion.
Carbon neutral, carbon positive, conscious. I couldn't choose, but yes, I would say
You
these are
think that
overused
there
now.
are several. A book or documentary that changed the way you see fashion.
True Cost. I think that was the first thing I saw before I got into the field of sustainability, and it was a real eye-opener and really shifted the way I look at fashion.
Fight one fast fashion CEO in a debate or be stuck in an elevator with them for 3 hours.
Fight with them while being stuck with them
Fight one fast. So you're basically debating one in a debate, or you're stuck with them in an elevator.
I would actually choose being stuck with them in an elevator where you have dedicated time to really understand what's going on. What are you thinking? And like knock some sense into them. I don't know. I really feel like having a dedicated time with the CEOs to understand what are the barriers so that you can work with them to solve the challenges, I think is a really important one. And to get a dedicated time of 3 hours in an elevator with that person is great. I think that would be a source of knowledge and information, and that would power the campaigns that have to come forward.
You'll have to pay the security a little bit in advance to get that
Done and
3
done.
hours. If you had a reality show about your work, what would the title be?
Inside the Fashion Revolution.
If you could swap wardrobes with anyone in history, who would that be?
Obviously my grandmother, but also I think Maharani Gayatri Devi has this fabulous, elegant style and all her chiffon saris. So yes, please.
Wow. I might ask you for some of the saris as
Done.
well.
We'll have a shared library
Yeah.
of Maharani Gayatri Devi chiffon
100%.
saris.
Count me in. If you could rename fast fashion to something more honest, what would you call it?
Overproduction factory or landfill fashion?
I like that, landfill fashion. If Fashion Revolution Week had a mascot, what animal would it be?
Okay, this is a fun one.
Yeah.
I think it would be bees because, bees are always like buzzing around, trying to save the planet, very well networked, great communicators, trying to make the change happen, very much like all the revolutionaries in our network in multiple countries across the globe, where we are super connected, we have similar issues, and we are always trying to build a better fashion industry.
Interesting. I think you should take that up and create like a fashion revolution bee community.
Done.
One thing about your work that would shock people.
It's not as glamorous as it seems. I think there's a lot of hard work, and there is a lot of learning every day. So you have to be open to changing your opinions also. So today, my opinions may be based on a certain data. I think we are not here to get stuck on that. So I think one of the biggest things is to be agile, to be adaptive, and to listen. So as much as we want to speak and share our thoughts and voices, but I think we have to be very cognizant of listening.
Interesting. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I hope it's been a fun session for you
I had
as
so
well.
much fun. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for today's episode. We hope this discussion inspired you to rethink your role in shaping the future of fashion. Remember that change starts with us, and it's time to make choices that matter. Until next time, keep rethinking and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode.